Loved it or hated it, if you finished Murderbot, you need something new to read. Let's get into some of those recommendations. So welcome to another installment of What to Read After. This one, of course, we're focusing on Martha Wells' Murderbot series. I'm assuming you already know, if you're watching this video, that this is a 7-installment series that is composed mostly of novellas. And in order to make some recommendations about what to read afterward, we have to kind of delve into some of the reasons why it was so popular, so that way we can focus our efforts of recommendations on those things. Now, I've divided this video, as I have many of the others, into books recommended for people who loved it and books recommended for people who didn't love it. So you're welcome to skip to the part that you want to. Let's talk about what made Murderbot such a phenomena. So the first thing that I have to mention here is that it was a fun, short snack of a read. It's a novella. I think that adds a little bit to its popularity because you don't have to invest as much time. It's also a little bit of a snarky internal monologue, which made it very fun. It was also pretty accessible. It was easy to find, at least in the US, in most bookstores. We also have the fact that Murderbot itself introduces us from the very beginning to its flaws. It self-identifies as a murder bot, kind of giving it a tongue-in-cheek nickname about its most negative feature. So then we also have to talk about immediate relatability, and that's because Murderbot immediately identifies its biggest pet peeve as humanity's stupidity.
Just when I think you couldn't possibly be any dumber.
Its coping mechanism for dealing with these is watching space soap operas. I mean, maybe not relatable for everyone, but kind of a little bit humorous. So we already have a lot to love about this Murderbot story. There's a lot of intrigue here that I think will make a lot of people pick it up, and it's so short that of course a lot of people finished it. Now, we also have to talk about some of the evil genius behind Murderbot, and that is beyond its just simple shortness and relatability. I think that the secret of introducing this character in such a short story that is known almost immediately for its flaws rather than any other characteristics, and seeing the perspective and the story very episodically but slow character growth through each adventure and each installment in the series allows this to transcend just a simple self-discovery adventure novel into focusing on its flaws, focusing on the growth of those flaws, and sliding right into a story about self-acceptance. And through its eyes and through these episodic installments, I think we also get a little bit of learning what it means to be human and accepting our own flaws through this story. And I think that is really where the secret genius of Murderbot, the phenomena, if you will, comes in. We also have to add that the series of Murderbot, because of its popularity, kind of brought the novella back. So it deserves a little bit of credit, whether you liked it or didn't, for bringing some of that modern popularity to novellas back, which I really appreciate because I don't think I had heard of a whole lot of novellas until this series, so gotta appreciate it for that. This now brings us to recommendations for people who loved Murderbot. Now, luckily, there are quite a lot of these stories that are either coming to the forefront or they are being written in hopes of kind of jumping on the bandwagon of the popularity that is the Murderbot phenomena. So luckily, I have a wide variety of choices, and these aren't even all of them. So for this list, in particular, I'm going to try to keep most of them to be focused on an AI, specifically AI perspectives. Now, there is one on here that isn't, so let's start talking about this. The first one I'm going to recommend is probably one of the most closely linked, and this is Psalm for the Wild Belt by Becky Chambers. Not only is this another novella, it comes with a sequel, but we also have a human who is searching for their purpose in life and what makes them happy. And lo and behold, they encounter a sentient robot in the wild, something that humans of this particular universe haven't seen in maybe centuries. And this monk befriends the robot android, and the journey to find their purpose and their quest of happiness proceeds from there. There is quite a lot of, self-help and philosophy all rolled up into this kind of cozy feeling novella that I think a lot of people who are enjoying that aspect of Murderbot will really enjoy. The next recommendation is Activation Degradation by Mariana Lobstetter. This one focuses on Unit 4, who is activated in the middle of a battle. And as the title suggests, has to continually sacrifice long-term sustainability and survival for short-term survival because it has to activate and throw things out. And the battle at hand means that it has to make some sacrifices for long-term sustainability. But as the story goes along, it discovers that things might not be what was originally presented when it was activated. And this changes all of its decisions. There's a lot to love in this particular novel, especially because it feels very much like the Murderbot series, except it's in one single book. And there is a little bit less character growth because we don't have as much space to work with, but it felt very similar. Next, we have a recent release, and that is Service Model by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This one also focuses on a robot that is programmed as a butler to humanity. And it's got a little bit of a darker twist because the robot discovers that its master is no longer functioning, and it doesn't quite understand that it has somehow killed its master and that there is a maybe robot uprising. And instead, it determines it to be a malfunction, and it goes out into the world seeking another human master to serve its programming. But of course, it slowly discovers that there are no more human masters left. And this leaves it with a very interesting perspective. I really liked this one in particular because it gives just a little bit of a perspective that robots would have a different value system and maybe a different perspective than our human minds would. All right, let's get into the next recommendation, which is Dark Theory by Rick Welker. This one is a self-published novel, I believe, and is one that follows a cute little wily robot on his adventures and discovers that he might actually have, dare I say it, magical powers. This one is a really beautiful combination of a little bit of science fiction with a little bit of fantasy, and it's a fun story with a lot of imagination. I think that people who are looking for that whimsical nature of Murderbot might really enjoy Dark Theory. Next, we have a duology by R. Robert Cargill, and that's going to be Sea of Rust and Day Zero. You can actually read these in any order, even though Day Zero is considered a prequel and Sea of Rust was originally the first one published. So Sea of Rust is actually from a android perspective after the robot revolution has wiped out humanity, and they're now reflecting on what they've done and what that means, and if they're actually better off without humans, or if they all have the same problems that we do. It's a very interesting, also tongue-in-cheek kind of story that I think people who enjoy Murderbot would like. But its prequel, Day Zero, I would probably sell people because it's happening when the robot uprising happened. And it focuses on a companion robot for a little human boy. And I would probably describe this one as a sci-fi robot Calvin and Hobbes. It's a very cutesy, very fun, but had lots of dark undertones happening in the background. So I think both of these would be a really good recommendation for people who like the Murderbot vibe, but want something that goes a little bit more into perhaps a robot uprising. And finally, the last recommendation is a novella series that has nothing to do with AI. That's right. I told you it was coming, and here it is. This one is a 3 novella series, although there might be another one coming, that starts with Full Speed to a Crash Landing by Beth Revis. This story follows a very lovable smuggler who is down on her luck and messes up her job and is needing saved by a local government official. And this official happens to be driving by and ends up putting her temporarily on his crew. What could go wrong? This was a very fun episodic novella series that didn't take itself too seriously, and I just felt like it was a little bit of the vibe of Murderbot. Now, this one does have to come with at least one other caveat, and that is there is a significant component of sci-fi romance in this story. But I thought it was fun, and so I'm going to add it as this last recommendation for people who are looking for another Murderbot style novella series that is a little bit more lighthearted. Now, let's get into some book recommendations for people who didn't really love Murderbot. Now, it's kind of hard to imagine, but if you didn't love Murderbot, I'm assuming that's because you felt a little disappointed by the hype, perhaps. You were looking for a little bit more depth. And so the way that I'm going to interpret that is I'm going to try to lean us a little bit more on the dark side.
Join me on the dark side of the force.
Let's see how I do. So the first recommendation that I'm going to go with is a novella that does have a significant amount more depth, and this is called Freeze Frame Revolution by Peter Watts. This novella is a lot darker, but you don't know it at first. It's following a group of people who have been tasked with building gates for civilization so that way people can travel as a intergalactic highway. But they've been doing it for so long, waking up in and out of cryo sleep, and they discover that there is something ominous happening on the ship. But it's really hard to discover what's going on because they keep waking up for just a few days every millennia or century or so. And they have been doing this for so long that they're starting to think they might need to run a coup so they can finally have some days off. This story was fun. It was interesting. There is a ship's AI that plays a significant part in the story, and there are quite a few fun little Easter eggs for a very prescient and very observant reader to find. I would highly recommend either the Kindle or the physical version of this story because of those Easter eggs. This one is a lot darker than Murderbot. Next, I'm going to recommend just a touch more lighthearted, and this one is going to be something for somebody who almost liked Murderbot but kind of just feels a little bit more indifferent to it. That's going to be Velocity Weapon by Megan O'Keefe. This story is the start of I believe it's a trilogy, and this one definitely follows a girl who wakes up after a battle and discovers that a millennia has gone by and is trapped on a piece of debris with an AI system that is one of the last in the system. And this story was devastating, emotionally intriguing, and it had a lot of fun twists and turns that I believe that somebody who is looking for just a little bit more depth in the Murderbot story would really enjoy. So I'm going to put that one here and move on to the next recommendation. All right, let's jump a little bit more into that dark, deep end with The Dark Side by Anthony O'Neill. This is a crime, sci-fi, thriller murder mystery story that deals with purgatory, the lawless and very seedy only city on the moon. This is where they send the criminals that they don't quite know what to do with. And purgatory is run by the mob. And one of our exile and our maybe too competent detective has just been exiled to purgatory for knowing a little bit too much about some of the politics that were happening in his precinct. And he arrives just in time for an android to go on a murder spree. Now, if that doesn't do it for you, I don't really know what you're looking for if you're looking for an AI story. This one was a little bit harrowing. There are some details here, but there was a lot of fun in this one. I had a really good time with it, and I'm hoping that people who are looking for something a little bit darker than Murderbot, this one might be for you. The next recommendation is one that is a little bit of a looser recommendation. This is for those people out there who, again, were a little bit not hating Murderbot, but just decided that maybe the AI side of things isn't really your trope. It's not your vibe. It's not what you're looking for. I think that you should check out Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Nouvelle. This story is opening with a little girl who falls into a cave and accidentally discovers a giant robot hand holding her up. And this hand, as it turns out, is only one piece of the entire puzzle and is not made on Earth. So we get kind of a first contact story. We get a very big focus on technology and robots, but they don't play a really important forward role until later installments into this series. Now, what you have to know about Sleeping Giants before you pick it up is that it is told in a series of government interviews. That's all it is government interview after government interview. And I was so impressed by this because you really get to learn a lot about all the different scientists and people who are studying this hand and people who are making all kinds of personal and social mistakes. So there's just a lot to love on this series. And I really thought this first installment might be something that goes a little bit in a different direction than the Murderbot series did. And I still think it's just as accessible. I still think it's just as fun. And it's not quite as dark as some of the other recommendations. So you'll have to check that one out and decide for yourself. Now, the last part of this is I always give at least one book that I feel like is the exact opposite of the book that we're talking about, the Murderbot series. So if we're going to do this, I ended up having two books that I think are the exact opposite of Murderbot. But one of them I can recommend a lot more highly than the other. So my first recommendation is going to be more of a classic sci-fi. It is a shorter one, and it is the one that I recommend, but only to some people. And that's going to be Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. This one is a new age classic sci-fi tale, and it is a nice short novel that is a one and done. But it is a lot more weird. It is a little bit slower than Murderbot. And what makes it so opposite is that the only difference between humans and androids in this novel is empathy. And the only way to tell whether somebody is an android or a human is to give them a special empathy test. This is a really interesting, exactly opposite idea than Murderbot, who is very empathetic and maybe overly so because they have all of this social anxiety that they have to deal with. And I thought that these offer two very different perspectives of what a android or robot would look like. Now, the other opposite book to Murderbot that I have to recommend on this particular list is 2001 Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. So I will tell you that the movie is much different than the book, in my opinion. I loved the book much, much more. But this one deals with first contact happening before humans are even evolved. And really, the first contact is what created human intelligence. What makes this book so opposite of Murderbot is that the main AI computer intelligence named HAL 9000 is kind of the bad guy. He was the quintessential AI bad guy, if you will. And it's a very classic story, and it's just very opposite of Murderbot. It's less about self-acceptance and self-discovery as it is about science and what it can do for us and being careful with what we wish for. So those are my recommendations for if you liked Murderbot and if you didn't like Murderbot. And I hope you guys go check out the TV show on Apple and let me know in the comments section how I did. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.